Good evening, everyone. This is a meeting of the Citizens Advisory Committee for Capital Expenditures. Today is February 13th, 2024. On the agenda this evening, we're going to start going into some of the details of the capital improvement needs inventory that we did a sort of in-depth overview last week. With particular this evening, we're going to be focusing on parks. I did have a couple follow-ups from last week's meeting, and I'm going to share a screen to start bringing up some of the presentations here. Let's see here. And hopefully that is coming up. And I'll highlight this. A couple things. We had mentioned on the inventory itself that we were going to add a few things, such as particularly with streets, which ones had grants already applied for or received. And so Rich has gone through that and has added notes on that, so everyone's aware of, and you can see in those columns some of those additional marks. I can't remember, Rich, what else? There were other changes. Any other changes to this inventory other than those notes that we added?
Yes, there was also two changes to the titles of traffic management phase 7. We showed all the limits that were.
Oh, I see. Yeah, right. We were going to put the parameters of those particular projects, so you've got the actual borders of those.
Right,
those
as well
7.
as we turned the grants in for those last Thursday. And so the local match shares were adjusted up just a bit, and those are now reflected on this list as well to match what went in with the grant applications East-West Gateway.
Okay. So those have been updated. This is posted underneath the agenda for tonight's meeting on the website. If you can't access, just let me know. We could send out another a link if you need it. But so that is out there. And so we'll be operating off of this version going forward. And then also there was some question about the previous appropriations, and I've added also under the website for tonight's agenda some of the prior appropriations from previous appropriations. The first exhibit I had mentioned were the general obligation bonds that were issued earlier last year of about $21 million, and these were those projects that were funded with that, and that was ordinance number 71661. Prior to that, we had the $24 million in appropriation as the half-year surplus from FY22, and that was also a separate appropriation, and all the projects are listed here, and that was ordinance number 71629. And then if you go back even further, the original board bill number 184, it included both some capital appropriations as well as appropriations from ARPA. So you had the half surplus from I believe that would have been FY21 at the time, and then some ARPA appropriation. Then we just had $1 million supplemental economic development sales tax. That is totaling nearly $87 million in appropriations with all these projects listed. And again, that ordinance was 71494. And if there's any particular ones, I'm sure if you have any questions about those, I'm sure Rich could give you a briefing on many of those at a future date, and if you had any particular follow-up questions with any of those. We have already covered some of them. You can see like pool renovations and rec center, the boiler replacement. Those are things that are recurring, things that you will currently see on our current inventory, because we addressed a part of those costs, but those are ongoing. So to the extent that we don't cover the whole cost, the remaining carries forward on the new inventory. So both the new inventory as well as these lists of projects are listed on the website. And if you can't find it, just let me know and we'll send you out a link. All right. In terms of this tonight's featured guests, we have Greg Hayes, who's director of the Parks and Recreation Forestry Department, as well as Kim Hagley, who is the Parks Commissioner, who handles a lot of the capital needs for parks themselves. This would be what we described as category C under the capital needs inventory. And you can see that we had critical needs identified totaling, I believe it was $48 million or so. There it is. And then some needed categories, 57, and desirable 151, in total 156, 256. What we're going to be focusing on this evening, and what Greg and Kim are going to be presenting on, are those $48 million in critical needs, to give you a little bit of idea about what's behind those numbers and the projects that those dollar amounts entail. And so if there's any questions on that, we can always refer back to the inventory, but we do have separate slides highlighting those. So given that, I will turn it over to Greg Hayes, the Director of Parks, Recreation, and Forestry.
I appreciate it, Paul. Thank you very much, Paul. Thanks to Rich Bradley and Kim Hagley, our Commissioner of Parks. And a special thank you to the Advisory Committee. Really appreciate your time and attention and interest in the city of St. Louis and these very important projects. We'll just go right to a discussion of what Paul mentioned, which are deemed the critical needs for our department. We are the Department of Parks, Recreation, and Forestry. Under our umbrella is Soulard Market and Brightside St. Louis. Some folks aren't aware of that, but they are in our department as well in terms of the management of those facilities. Let's just start off and go down the list. Kim will be here with me, so to speak, and we'll try to address any questions you may have. So park maintenance, building renovations, essentially, there's 10 we're talking about. As you know, we have 6 regional parks in the city of St. Louis. One of them is Tower Grove, which is not managed by our department, but we have 5 regionals under our purview and our management purview, and 5 additional buildings, which we essentially call like a home base where crews report out of. They're based in, for instance, Compton Hill Reservoir, Sublette, Marquette, Sherman Park. So those are some of the park buildings we're talking about. Our main concern with this $15 million ask, if you will, or request and figure, these maintenance buildings have had decades of problems of maintenance that has not been performed. We have some pictures here of, as it notes on the slide, you know, we have issues with broken fences, broken windows, tuck pointing issues, roof issues, leaking roofs. I mean, it varies across the buildings and these are our employees that report to these buildings. They go there every day to work, the men and women of our parks division. And we feel not only do the buildings need respect, but more importantly, if you will, our staff members deserve the respect to work in safe conditions, sanitary conditions. We have Reservoir Park is an example of, you know, if one of the employees wants to get a drink of water, we really don't have a functioning operational sink. That's been the case in the past. So they go to a gas station. So these buildings deserve respect. They deserve maintenance, and our employees do as well. Otherwise, we are going to lose these buildings, or before that, they'll become unsafe for our staff. Moving on, I spent a lot of time on that because that's obviously a high ticket item. Boiler replacements. We have antiquated or older boilers, if you will, boiler systems, and we definitely don't want to go into a St. Louis fall winter and lose heat with these employees that work in these buildings. So that's a critical bones of the building issue, if you will, that a lot of citizens won't see, but we're cognizant of the fact that they need replacement. Pool renovations, as Paul had an earlier slide with 1 million dedicated to pools, but we have 7 pools. We have 4 indoor and 3 outdoor. They are very popular, as you know, outdoor, especially from June through August. These pools are in need of major renovations. We have problems with the piping. We have problems with the structures themselves. And the last thing we want to do is have 3 pools citywide outdoor and lose any of them due to exorbitant needs. So 5 million, I can assure the committee that 5 million could get spent rather quickly, and Kim, I'm sure, would attest to that as well, because she works very closely with our Recreation Commissioner, Joaquina Callion. There is a separate slide, I believe, on Soulard market renovations. As you know, it's a beloved, iconic place down in Soulard, very popular, lower cost, if you will, inexpensive items for folks that may not have the financial means to go to fancier markets. We personally, obviously, are biased. We love Soulard Market. It needs a lot of attention. It has a lot of piping issues. You could go down there, just see the roofs over the wings, the outdoor,
Greg?
indoor wings. Yes.
Yeah, you wanna, I've got a separate slide on that. We could go past that and go
Yes,
through this
yeah.
list, and then I'll come back to it, because I do have a separate
Yeah.
exhibit for that.
Absolutely. Rec center, let's go down to HVAC upgrades at the rec centers. Pretty self-explanatory. These are older buildings. When I was talking to Kim earlier this morning, Cherokee was just an example. She worked in another city agency many years ago, and that's the last recollection she has of anything with Cherokee even being addressed with the HVAC needs there. So 6 million is probably we contend is a very fair figure of addressing the HVAC upgrade needs at 7 rec centers that are managed by city staff. We can move down to Barrett Brothers Comfort Station. We essentially lost that building. Barrett Brothers is a very popular park. It's one of our 110 city parks. As you can tell, comfort stations are not inexpensive fixes. So the building needs to be replaced with a new comfort station. Folks deserve to be able to use a restroom when they go to the park with a water fountain. You should be able to wash their hands instead of having to leave the park and come back. So Barrett Brothers is obviously a very important need. Same with the Clifton Heights Comfort Station. Kim attended a recent community meeting with the folks that live near Clifton Heights, and very, very important to those folks to get that work done. Simply haven't had, Kim does not have the funds, or Parks does not have the funds to do that necessary work, and she may be able to go into a little more detail on that. O'Fallon Park YMCA, the parking lot, if you've been to O'Fallon, it's run by the YMCA. It's owned by the city of St. Louis. There's some rain gardens there, and it just slops off, if you will, crude way of saying it, but it just drops off with the asphalt by those rain gardens, cracked asphalt. And we don't need trip hazards, and we don't need vehicular hazards on anywhere on that parking lot. So that's an important fix up there at the O'Fallon Park YMCA. The repair and replace glass block exterior wall at Wool Rec Center at Kings Highway and Dr. Martin Luther King. Pretty self-explanatory. Wool Rec Center is our most highly participative rec center. Very popular. Folks going in there. 12th and Park is probably a close second. Definitely need that work done, and we've been looking at that for many years. Structural repairs to exterior walls at Cherokee, self-explanatory, if you will. And then O'Fallon and Carondelet Park YMCA. As you know, I believe it was 2009 was when one was built, 2012 roughly, maybe a little off on the years. We consider those state-of-the-art facilities, but they're already over a decade old. So maintenance needs are coming along, and they're coming, and we need the funds to be able to address those needs in those buildings. They're state-of-the-art to all of us, but it doesn't mean they're not aging. Finally, so I can not dominate here too much. Hazardous tree removal. We were fortunate in forestry a couple years ago, Paul probably knows 2 or 3 years ago, to get capital funds to fund hazard tree removals, city tree removals, the ones you see in the parkway or the tree lawn in front of your homes. Those are city responsibility due to staffing needs or staffing limitations. We had to seek capital funds, so we hired a contractor who's a professional contractor, does an excellent job, and $1 million roughly will take out about 2,000 city trees in need of removal. And as you know, we're always in need of trim and removal services in the city. security cameras. That 1415 North 13th is the forestry building. It does house facilities management staff and our downtown park crew. Pretty self-explanatory on security cameras. My personal contention is you can't have enough cameras in the city or anywhere. And then ash tree removal. We've been at this at least 5 or 6 years. When emerald ash borer was a positive detection in North St. Louis, we need to take the ash trees out that were planted many years ago. We had a high concentration of them citywide. So we've been working at that. So that's $500,000 to continue to pay that same contractor to remove ash trees in the city. If you don't remove them, you have major problems. So that brings us to the grand total of 48, as Paul mentioned, 48,000, a little over that. And Paul, if you want to go to the
Yeah.
Soulard, I do have a few comments about that.
Yeah, before we jump there, Greg,
Yeah.
there was a question last week about contracting the service of tree trimming versus the in-house trimming and all. Could you explain how those two work together? Because I know the $1,000,001 we have here is basically going out for a contract, but then you also have in-house staff as well. So just explain a little bit more about how you handle that.
Sure. So we have, this may get into some minutia, but in our table of organization for forestry, we are fortunate to have 29 tree trimmer positions. On average, we are about half or less than half occupied in those positions. So a few years ago, we just made the management decision that and said we cannot handle 80 to 85,000 street trees and 30 to 35,000 park trees in the city, if you will, with existing limited staff. So we put out a request for proposal, a competitive proposal, and said we need help just to fill that void. So we selected a contractor. That contractor came in at a good price. They're very good at what they do. So we have tasked them the last few years with handling the larger removals in the city, if you will. They can remove any city tree, but we've tasked them with that because a lot of the tree trimmers we do get, they're just, quite frankly, not as experienced. And when we get them and try to keep them, we can also lose them. So the private contractor does an excellent job that we would also do if we were full with 29 tree trimmers, but we're not. So we had to fill that void. Otherwise, we have unnecessary problems in the city. So they work hand in hand. And that contractor, Paul, as you know, also does ash tree removal. So our forestry crews do remove trees and we do trim trees. But if we were fully staffed, we'd throw a lot more crews out there at trimming and work hand in hand with the contractor. It was an operational decision we had to make and we had to request.
Great, thanks. And the stump removal is still an in-house, that when you come out and grind the stumps, that's an in-house operation still.
Correct. In any stump, unless there's an anomaly that happens, any stump in the city of St. Louis is going to be ground by forestry staff or perhaps park staff at times.
Okay. Then another couple of comments. I think I mentioned this last week when we went over the inventory briefly. The security cameras, I was going to suggest, given that that might be a smaller amount, if that might be something to be able to do with the transfer with current operating budget funds. If we could get that done this fiscal year, then just get that off the list. I mean, it might work that way if you can.
Sure. And sadly enough, going back to pools and security cameras, Fairgrounds Park, if you didn't know, was pretty much destroyed and stripped clean a year ago, and we didn't even open it for the year. A lot of citizens, especially in the community around there at Grand and Natural Bridge, were very upset. It was an uncontrollable thing that Rich Bradley, Kim Hagley, and myself and many others worked on to try to get the pool back up to speed. We're confident of that now, but absent security cameras is a problem. And so on our city buildings with theft and property damage, it doesn't hurt to have them. So we want to have them. And
Okay.
Fairgrounds is just an example. Just like forestry, we have a lot of equipment down there and we have a lot of staff report down there. So security cameras are very helpful, in my opinion.
Okay. We do have a few questions before we get to the Soulard slide. So let's see if we can do these. were there any okay, well, this is a Soulard question. Were there any capital expenditures at Soulard Market during the last budget cycle? Actually, we did appropriate $1.5 million. If you look at those previous appropriations that I talked about at the very start of the meeting, we did appropriate $1.5 million to Soulard Market. So I think the biggest, and Kim, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think the biggest priority there was the boiler first. Again, that's not something you see necessarily, but it's crucial to the operation of the facility. And then they're going to move from there to other things that might be done. But obviously, the total need was identified, north of 7 million or something like that. So we had $1.5 million the last appropriation, and I think we're looking for what else we can achieve. If I've misstated anything, Greg, you can correct me.
I'll just jump in. Kim may have something to add. You're correct about that, Paul. If any one of us, obviously I go to Soulard Market, if any one of us would walk in the basement, Rich and Kim know this, if you walk in the basement and look at that boiler system down there, you just walk right back up the stairs. So that's why some of the money you're mentioning in the last year is being put to that boiler. And Kim, I don't know if I misspoke at all, but I know that's a first priority with the funds, unprecedented funds that came in for Soulard starting this past year.
Yeah, so I had a conversation with facilities management who is helping me along with that project. And we are in the design stage for that boiler. It is original to the building. And there's been an assessment on it for asbestos and things like that because it is original to the building. So we're into it already for about just a little over $50,000, which doesn't sound like much, but when I spoke to facilities this week, I asked because we have the $1.5 million there, and I was thinking the same thing. We have a tuck pointing issue right now, and we don't have the funds in the operating budget to cover it. And I was told that I shouldn't touch that money because we'll probably be right at that amount for just the boiler itself for Soulard. So that's kind of where we're at right now with that.
Thanks, Kim. Where is Barrett Brothers Park?
Up at Goodfellow, off of Goodfellow.
Yeah, it's at the northern edge of the city.
Okay.
It's a very active neighborhood. A lot of, and it's within the last probably 3 years, it's really become activated with summer camps. Unfortunately, the foundation or the slab has heaved up in the middle of it, which through all the walls, and there's huge cracks in it and things like that. Rich Bradley staff's been out to take a look at it. We had the building division out to take a look at it, and the consensus was that it needed to be removed and replaced. We'd like to replace it, but at the least, we're going to have to remove it because it's a safety issue.
Right. Let me add real quick, Paul. Yeah, St. Louis Avenue and Goodfellow, just like I would say is the case around many of our parks. There's a lot of pride in that neighborhood. And the last two summers, one maybe two, we've seen a lot of kids playing in there. We had a volunteer group that was in communication with the recreation division. There was a lot of programming going on in there. And of course, one of the questions posed to us was what's up with this restroom? And so anytime in those cases, we will rent a porta potty to replace what is not there. But we had a lot of kids up there, and we think that's going to continue this summer as well. So it's turned into a very popular park for summer programming, even if it's volunteer.
Right. And actually, that's a good question too, in terms of where I think what we'll be doing, I'm going to be asking to get some of these other items. We did map the streets out, but when it comes to some of these other locations, last time we also put these on a map, and we'll try to get that done. We'll see how long it takes, but usually PDA does that stuff for us. So we'll get a map of those locations so you know where our project is located. And then finally, I assume the sublet YMCA is not city-owned?
Correct.
That's correct, yeah.
Just the O'Fallon and Carondelet, which, and I want to emphasize that again. I don't want to be redundant, but Kim would definitely, when I meet with Kim, we do, and Rich as well, we do have frustrations and concerns in terms of, 10 to 15 years out now, the maintenance issues are coming. We had a fire at Carondelet we were dealing with. Somebody set outer area by the outdoor pool on fire. So we just keep our fingers crossed that these maintenance needs don't get exorbitant too quickly, but they're definitely building.
And finally, the other question is, many of these projects are carryover from years past. Can you indicate which one are new to the list? Are there any on these items that weren't discussed previously on the previous go round?
I'll take
I can add a little bit of light to that if you like.
go ahead, Rich.
If you don't mind. Can you page up to the top of this page, please? We'll come down. That was from Katie. I'll give you the ones that are add-ons, and that way you'll know all the other ones are something we've not touched before. So number 2, boiler replacement is an add-on. Number 3, pool renovations is an add-on. Number 4, Soulard Market renovations is an add-on. Then
Well, hey, Rich, when you say add-on, you're saying what?
what she's asking is projects that we have done, funded some money in the past for.
Okay, yeah, 'cause specifically is asking which ones are new that we hadn't been on the list before.
Right, so so I thought it was a question about which ones are add-ons versus new, and new, in my opinion, is things we have not funded. Now, if it's new to the list, then Greg and Kim can talk to that.
Yeah, I know maintenance. Well, I won't talk about the ones that were on there, but maintenance, the maintenance buildings, yes, they were on their boiler. Pool renovations, I'd have to double check myself. Soulard definitely was on there. Kim, I don't believe 14 through 19 were. Is that correct?
No, right. So Barrett Brothers, Clifton Heights, the O'Fallon Parkway, yeah, yeah. Those right there that are highlighted were all new.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm not sure what our answer for Katie is on that.
She said new
5.
to the list.
Pardon me?
Yeah, that would be
She
new
said
to the
new
list.
to the list.
I got you.
And the
Okay.
other items, we
We did-
would have funded at some piece of it being funded, but the total ask is so much greater that we only be able to address some of it, like the pools, the boilers, Soulard, and such like that. Yeah, right.
Right, so we received some boiler funding, pool renovation, $1.9 million for rec center boiler replacements, $1 million for pool renovations, and $2.5 million for rec center roof replacements. And that all came out of ARPA money last year.
Right. Okay.
And then out of capital, we had additional boiler replacements. And then we had Soulard Market renovations, and that's the 1.5 million that we're starting with the boiler.
Right. Okay.
And Paul, I appreciated, I know we worked on these pictures. We could provide a lot more, but we don't want to inundate the committee, but the pictures pretty much tell the story. I mean, I don't know if encourage is the right word, but any citizen or anyone on the committee could drive by any of those park yards I mentioned, our regional park, Sherman, Sublet, et cetera, and you can just pull up in the park and get a good look at what our staff have to report to every day. And it certainly, they're not inspirational. They certainly hurt the pride of folks that would like a nicer building, nicer facilities, and they deserve it.
Well, the other thing is those park yard buildings sit in neighborhoods. So we have an expectation that, the citizens of St. Louis keep their property up, yet, we're not doing a good job ourselves of it. And that park yard that you see at the top, you can see daylight from the basement through, the first floor up through the ceiling. So that one by far is our worst. And the numbers that you see there, that's not for anything cushy or plush. That's basically tuck pointing roofs, soffit and fascia, windows, doors, things like that. One, to make the exterior envelope watertight, but also it's not an eyesore for the people that live around those locations.
Right. They don't like to see it as well, because I'm not saying we get inundated with complaints from citizens, but I can assure you citizens don't like to look at those buildings, and they definitely wouldn't if they went inside them.
Right.
Well, the biggest thing is if we lose the buildings, that houses not only staff, but equipment. So, and we can't afford to build new. And unfortunately, this was never a priority until, the last couple of years. I've been here 7. So in the last 2 years, 3 years, I've been trying to, put some money aside that Paul alludes to as my Metro Park funds and neighborhood park funds, but I just don't have, because it's gone on so long. And, all of them are in such poor repair. It's more of a fire, you're just putting out fires here and there where the severe problems pop up.
Okay, and this is following up on that earlier question about what's new and what's held over. For the ones that carry on from last year, is the amount shown the project cost or the additional amount needed to complete the project. I believe these are, for instance, with pool renovations, I believe it was 7 million originally. We appropriated twice, and so now the remaining is 5, which is the net need there. And I think that's similar to like the boiler renovations and all. Now the numbers do change over time simply because the inflationary costs and go up. So you might not, if you go 3 years, you might not, and you appropriate $1 million, it doesn't necessarily go down by $1 million. It might go 750 or something based on the change in the cost over time. But yeah, it should reflect the fact that we've appropriated in prior years a portion of the total, so it should be going down. Did I misstate anything there, or is that pretty much it, Rich or Greg?
I think that sounds spot on, and
Yeah,
I
okay.
see Dennis's question. That's a good question.
Yep.
And I think that's an accurate description of it, Paul. or
Okay, now,
answering it.
and
I
speaking
agree.
of good
They're pretty
questions, because I
good.
ask
Good
this one all the
question.
time when I get departments requesting budget stuff. What are your top 3 priorities on this list?
Okay, I'm chuckling because if I speak too soon, Kim Hagley is gonna say, Greg, I deal with this more directly on a daily basis than you. So I'm gonna respect her opinion, and Kim, I feel we owe Dallas Adams an answer. So I'm gonna let you pick. If you had to pick 3 priorities, I
If
think I
I,
know.
if I had to pick 3, I would say my number 1 would be pools. We're gonna lose the pools. They're original to the building. And the only pool that's had major renovations to it is Fairgrounds. And that's not with the vandalism, that's with the underground piping. So it had all the piping underneath. So when you have the pool deck, there's tunnels underneath there, and all that piping was replaced, and the pool deck was replaced, and it was renovated about 7 years ago itself. And so but that, I mean, the pictures that I have, you can't even believe that they're still operating. And that's my biggest concern, because of how well used they are and our summer camp programs. So that would be my number one pick. I'm torn between park maintenance building renovations and Soulard Market renovations. So, even though I'm kind of responsible for Soulard Market renovations, obviously my loyalty is the park buildings and my staff. But I know that as Park Recreation and Forestry, we have a commitment to Soulard. And this is what I would say about Soulard. We need to decide as a city whether or not we're going to be in the market business. And if we're going to do it, we need to take it seriously and put some more amount of money into the renovations of the market. The wiring is horrible. The plumbing is horrible. The stalls aren't what they should be. We patch them, we paint them, we do what we can, but it's in a constant state of, something is always wrong. And then, I would say my third one would be, Cherokee and the structural, repairs to the exterior walls. We have a lower roof that's on the front of the building that faces Jefferson, and we have a taller roof, and the parapet walls there and things like, and the tuck pointing itself for the building. It's another one of those things, if we don't do something soon, the wall between the two roofs is gonna cave in on itself. So, and when I say that, it's that bad. So, yeah, those would be my top three.
Yeah, and I'll jump in with some commentary here. I wouldn't stray from the three Kim picked whatsoever. She's very good to Soulard because her all the trade staff are under Kim. And let me just tell you one thing about Soulard, and I agree with the comment. We definitely want to be in the market business because that's a city facility. I meet with the Soulard market manager bi-weekly or more if necessary, and I meet with him at 8:30 tomorrow. Where I'm going with this is he provides me with the occupancy percentage I ask for bi-weekly. We just had a couple open stands, and I bet we had 15 to 20 interested vendors, and they are wanting to work there and vend at a place that needs massive help. So can you imagine what kind of market we could have down there if we made the improvements and the renewed or even new interests from all kinds of vendors and really shaping it up? People love the market as it looks. And I just can't imagine the potential. We did before my tenure, a master plan was done, as you probably know, in 2012. And back then it said there were about $14 million in short-term, intermediate, and long-term needs. So that was $14 million 12 years ago. It's just an iconic destination that we need to preserve, in my opinion.
And let me just say, these aren't the pretty things. Again, I'm not looking for, as you can see from this list, there's nothing in there that's like new flooring or, things like that. This is just to keep the building intact, to keep it from catching fire, these are some serious renovations that need to be done.
Yeah, Greg, since we were talking about Soulard, I went ahead and pulled up that slide. do you want to just highlight some of these, or you want to just briefly go through these and then we'll get back to the questions?
Sure. The wiring and the lights are shoddy at best. I mean, a lot of things have been, troubleshoot the lights. Vendors years ago did some of their own electric, and I mean, it's safe, but it's just a lot of antiquated wiring that needs replaced. The plumbing is bad. That's another one to highlight. The roof replacement that I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting definitely needs replacement on the wings. And it noted we did get some funds. I don't remember the figure of the main building, which houses the Grand Hall, was touched up, but it's just been touch up, Band-Aid, if you will. The windows obviously are in need of replacement. Just walking, I mean, just walking throughout the market, there's undulation there. It's difficult just to walk with your family through there. The asphalt, what have you, there's holes that we patch, there's doors that we fix, there's doors that won't shut properly. I think that kind of explains it. The restrooms need help. Well, I see sidewalk ADA accessibility. That certainly goes to what I'm talking about, just going through the market and shopping. Julia, as you know, is the street that connects with Soulard Market Park over there. That's a lot of, not necessarily potholes, but it's just it's rough to even drive a car through there. So as Kim said, these are the bones of the building. These aren't fancy, pretty things. Maybe at some point we could get to those things after some of these things are done, but that'd be the ideal world. But Rich and Kim and I just keep our fingers crossed that we don't get a call about something happening at Soulard. And I'm not trying to be dramatic, but yes, if you look at the pictures to the left, pretty self-explanatory. And like I said, these folks want to be there. They want to shop there and they want to vend there. Can't even imagine how it would be if it got some funds thrown toward it. So I just didn't want to go into great detail on that $6 million list.
That's fine. Let's get back to some of these questions. Let's see, where did we leave off? The pictures. Okay, is there a reason we're not doing PM or the buildings and pools so the capital outlay is not as high? I just think I'm just thinking over the years, just budgetarily, there's been some restrictions on what's available for just doing maintenance day to day. And so eventually you end up behind, but I don't know if you wanted to comment on that, Greg or Rich.
I would just say that typically the funding for maintenance has been very, very limited. And so what we typically do with it is make obvious repairs to things that are failing. More than normal, what happens is that something fails and we respond to it, and then we have to find the money for it. So it's about funding availability. If we could put a large chunk into it, we could rebuild the existing original systems in the building that have been worked on for 100 years, 50 years, and put those systems in new, and that would be the more proper repair than fixing just little problems as they come up. Just like having an old vehicle, it will nickel and dime you to death. Old buildings do exactly the same thing, and at some point, just like a car, at some point they fail, and then you have to go out and do something different. And as Kim expressed very articulately, we do not and will not have capital anytime in the near future to afford new buildings, because as you saw the cost of a comfort station, imagine a building of this magnitude, and beyond that, imagine a building of this historical significance. trying to replace something like that.
Okay. Yeah, Dallas, I noticed that you said, please rescind my previous question. Thank you. I believe that was priority. I'll give my own thoughts on prioritizing, because I know we've had this discussion before, particularly as Kim mentioned with pools and with some of particularly the boilers. If something breaks and you can't actually use the facility itself, that's a pretty high priority item. Obviously, so whether it's the piping in the pool or so that you can't use that facility during the summer, or it's a breakdown in the boiler so that you can't occupy it during the winter, those rise to the level of being high priority items, because you're actually losing the use of the facility itself. There are other items, obviously, and then both maybe on the critical list and desirable or needed list, that are more to the aesthetics of the facility, which are obviously important, but might not rise to that level of actual usability. And that's some of the things we look at in terms of the critical needs. And obviously, you'd like to have enough money to do as much as you can, make it as both usable and pleasant environment. But again, that's why we have these meetings, to try to go over that and see what do we really want to prioritize here.
I concur, Paul, and invariably we do get calls where Kim will notify me, Joaquin will notify me, or somebody notifies one or both of them, hey, Cherokee's down today, the pool's down, Wool's down, pool's down, and that requires communication with residents. I mean, we have a very popular aerobics program, for example, at Wool and 12th and Park, and that's an adult, the adult population. They rely on that for their morning exercise. So when we're taken out of service, quite often it's problematic.
Does the city own the YMCA building? If so, does the YMCA pay rent?
Yes, and there is no rent structure. They do have, Kim, what is their they have a capital reserve account, for instance, when Carondelet is successful with their units, which is memberships, their revenues go into that, and they do pay for some repairs beyond a certain monetary figure.
So both the O'Fallon Recplex and the Carondelet Recplex, they both pay $10,000 first out of pocket, and then the other repairs are my responsibility. But the last thing I had were the lights in the swimming pool area at O'Fallon Park, at the O'Fallon Recplex. We were starting to get dinged by the health inspector, and because the lighting wasn't what it should be, and it probably was at the time, but that bill was $38,000. So these aren't, these are huge buildings, state-of-the-art buildings. So these, even a small ticket item like that is a lot of money. So, and I can't even imagine what the cooling towers and the heating cooling systems for those buildings are what they're going to be like over time. So, and then you're right, Greg, when they're successful, which depending on how they do, I can get a couple $100,000 for repairs, and I do limit them. They have to be agreed upon, and sometimes there's things that they want to do that I don't consider to be. They wanted to tint some windows, and I was like, I'm not agreeing to tint windows. We have to save this for the hardcore nitty gritty things that are coming down the pike. So we do meet quarterly and sit down and talk about what's coming up, what they're doing, what their concerns are, what renovations or repairs that are coming up, and we agree to that. And then, depending on what's in that surplus account, we try to fund it out of that first. It actually works out kind of well, because by the time I'm out of money, and with our fiscal year, their new fiscal year is starting, so it's worked out well that, you know, that $10,000 that they do have, has gotten us over the hump, quite a few years, but, in the whole scope of things, it's really that's a drop in the bucket.
Right,
Yes,
right.
Mr. Hayes, there is a tremendous amount of hazard trees all over the city, especially in North St. Louis. So I'm hoping that the $1,000,000 would cover it, because when we have these storms, they just knock these trees and damage cars and cause fatality around the community. So I'm hoping that's enough. Did it also include where the trees buckle where the roots of the trees buckle the sidewalks? There's money in that budget to replace those sidewalks when that happens?
The $1,000,001, sir, would not be, that would not be paying for new sidewalks. They would pay for trees that are considered warranted removals by our team and done by contractors or city employees, but no, it wouldn't apply to sidewalk replacement. That's a separate program with the street department. But I appreciate your comments. Yes, not only do we have trees that need to be removed, that number increases when you have an uncontrollable storm event, especially in the spring when there's leaves on the trees, which they're much more susceptible to causing more damage than in the fall, winter, when high winds just blow right through them. Spring and summer is when we get more concerned.
Hey,
One
Greg,
other
how do you
question,
go
Mr.
about-
Hayes.
I
One more
I
other
was gonna
question,
ask-
Mr. Hayes, I would like to ask, in regards to last year's budget, do you happen to know the dollar amount that was allocated to minority contractors and women contractors, and how many jobs was created?
I do not know that those I don't have that information offhand. No, I do not.
All right, thank you.
Hey, Greg, how do you go about prioritize or taking your inventory of trees that need to come down?
Sure. We have a high reliance and emphasis on Citizen Service Bureau, but I always say our arborists that are out there, we have certified arborists with International Society of Arboriculture. They're the ones that inspect these trees. So I always say they don't have blinders on or tunnel vision. They will look, if they see a hazard tree next to one that's been reported to the Citizen Service Bureau, they'll do an in-house work order. But basically on hazard ratings, we have a rating system of how we rate that tree, and those take the highest priority. We rate trees as 30-day removals, can be removed in 6 months, what have you, and that's based on the arborist's discretion. So we try to make sure we stick to that standard as best we can. Storms, as Mr. Ironzell pointed out, storms definitely throw a wrench into everything,
Right.
and they set us back at times can set us back 2-3 weeks a month, but it's prioritized by a certified arborist.
Okay, great, thanks. Next question we have here, what are the comparisons of replacing or repairing the pool? So when you look at the pool projects, when you say, oh, well, this one's so far gone, could we consider replacing it? How do you go about doing that?
That's a good question. I may defer.
I would have to defer if Rich doesn't mind.
Yeah, I'll throw some commentary in
I
that.
mean, I can't even imagine what a new pool would cost.
Right, so what I would say is this, is that these pools are massive. The indoor pools, I believe Greg said, correct me if I'm wrong, you guys, there are 3 outdoor and 4 indoor pools. So first of all, replacing an indoor pool would be a tremendous undertaking with all the footings, foundations, and everything included there. So it would be much cheaper in those cases. The outdoor pools are absolutely massive. And so what we've done in all those is look at ways to extend their useful life by doing things like, for example, at the Marquette Rec Center, there was a problem with the main drain in the deep end of the pool. And after consulting with the Parks Department and working with the aldermen and the neighborhood groups, what everybody found out is that, you know, nobody really uses the deep end of that pool that much. They like to be more in the shallow water. So we came up with a plan working with a pool contractor to basically replumb in a new drain that's higher and fill the deep end of the pool up and make it more of a wading type pool. So, you know, we've tried to be very innovative with extending these lives. We would not be able to touch a new pool, a new residential shotcrete pool today that you may put in your backyard for anybody that has a pool is somewhere between $100,000 and $150,000. And those are very, very small. So if you multiplied it, these pools that we're spending $1 million on to renovate could be anywhere, you know, 20, $30 million to replace the pool easily, without question.
Yeah, I remember that Marquette project and sitting and talking about, scratching our heads about that. And I thought that was a pretty creative solution that came about. So, okay, Bob Ray should get a raise. There's a comment. I imagine that means something. I see Kim smiling.
That's who I meet with at 8:30 tomorrow that I mentioned earlier. So
okay.
I feel compelled to tell him the comment was made.
Okay, there's a complimentary comment. Okay, I think in the picture you provided there are helpful. This is just complimentary of your the pictures are helpful. Yeah, I'm sure, and I do have other pictures that Kim and Greg have, and I'm sure they do too. We could share. Very helpful. Okay, leading to another. Can we email me the spreadsheet you're using tonight? Actually, both of these sheets are posted online. So on the website, if you look below the agenda posted on the website, they are posted there. But I could also, if you want to just reach out a separate email, I could email it to you as well. And then it sent me a question about street paving. Oh, there's a question about the Gateway Mall west of Tucker. So do you guys basically mow? So in talking about the Gateway Mall, which is downtown, and again, west of Tucker, like Pelker Park and all, what are your responsibilities related to that?
Yes, so Kim has a downtown parks crew. Of course, forestry can assist with trees, but that's basically a true statement. You start with Pelker and Kaufman there right at Tucker and Market, run all the way to 20th Street where the new soccer stadium is, where Allo Plaza is, and Mills Fountain. Yes, those are parks all through that linear stretch cut by Parks Department. Yes.
Okay.
We did take responsibility though for the Mills Fountain. We did have a donation come in to help get that back up on track, but the reflection pool that's around that sculpture is in need of some work, and we are the granite panels are bowing out, and the pool itself needs a new concrete bottom, but those are both items that I'm able to take care of out of Metro Park and neighborhood park funds.
Thank you. Okay, and Katie Shackelford's shared a link to the minority hiring disparity study. So Mr. Irons, you had some questions about that. There is a link to that under the St. Louis Development Corp website.
No, I wasn't concerned about the study. I'm concerned about, you know, since we evaluating the previous budget as a committee, I want to be able to evaluate what was the dollar amount that was allocated to minority contractors and women contractors, and how many jobs were created from these budgets based upon the workforce development orders, anything over $1 million. And without having those numbers, I can't make a evaluation on how I think the program, the improvement capital program actually was success.
Right. Rich, did you want to just explain what your requirements are for each of those projects?
Yeah, right. So, you know, as I kind of mentioned briefly last week, let me just go back again. So we are required by city ordinance 70767 on contracting to have our goals for M and WBE participation, as I'm sure you're very, very aware of. And on consultants for professional service agreements, it is 25 and 5 M and W. And so what happens at the end, actually throughout, from the beginning of the project, from the time it is actually bid, from the beginning through utilization of the workforce and the business enterprises through the project, the city's contract compliance office, which is under the guidance of Stacy Fowler over at St. Louis Development Corporation, goes through and monitors all of these programs to make sure that we're in compliance. We don't actually in BPS monitor the compliance. It is done by St. Louis Development Corporation. So they're the ones who look at the payrolls, look at the workforce, and determine what the final results are versus what the beginning results are. And then, as you mentioned, on projects that are over $1 million of construction costs, there is a workforce participation goal. For example, I will mention on the convention center project right now that, you know, all the goals for that project, including the workforce, are monitored on a monthly basis. And then at the end, there will be a summation for all those. Many of these projects that Paul has listed on the previous money spent are not completed. They're not even through design. Some of them may be in construction, but the vast majority of them are not completed. So in order to get a full snapshot of what you're looking for, you would have to wait until the project is done and look at the final numbers. Otherwise, it wouldn't show you what the final number is going to be.
But I was only concerned about those projects that has been completed. And I think Paul mentioned about ordinance 71661. And that was been about what, a couple of years ago. So whatever the projects that was completed, I just would like to know what was the dollar amount allocated to minority and women-owned businesses, and what was how many jobs was created, because if the capital improvement budget is supported by the half-cent sales tax,
Right.
I'm tending to believe that the more minority people participate in the program, that they're going to spend that money in the city of St. Louis. I'm also tending to believe that the workers that work in St. Louis are going to spend their money in the city of St. Louis. That would increase the budget for us to do other things in our city. But if you're asking me to sit on a committee and do an evaluation of what took place previously, I could in good faith give, the information without knowing what happened. I mean, if public service does a street program, and once they pay them, I mean, how much did the minority worker get paid? How much did the minority contractor get paid? Now we got to go to SLDC to get the information. I will. I just thought that the people that would be on this panel would know the information, but I don't have no problem asking SLDC for the information. Is this where I need to go?
So I will go back just for a second about your comment about Board Bill 184 that a couple years ago. Most of those projects are not completed. It takes the time to design them, plan them. None of the paving projects that are on there have been completed yet. They are just first going to construction coming forward. So again, many of those are not done. I would say the vast majority of them, without looking at the list, are not done, but you need to look at the final numbers to get the information, and those numbers should reflect what Board Bill 120 shows as far as what the goals are. Now, as far as job creation goes, that would not be anything that I would have. That would be something that SLDC would have to provide with you.
Okay, thanks, Rich. Thanks, Todd. Another comment from Dennis. There's a question about, just as an FYI, the eternal flame in the park at 14th Street. No, that's been off for a while, isn't it? I thought that was by design, but go ahead if you had any.
I think Kim will reply, or maybe, yeah, Kim may reply, but yes, I'm glad Dennis brought that up just west of Soldiers Memorial. I know we worked years ago with the American Legion, and they put the fence around it, and and Soldiers Memorial. So we'll definitely check that out.
Okay,
I appreciate that.
okay. And I believe that is the last outstanding question we have. So let's go back. In some, as Greg pointed out, there's over $48 million in critical needs here for parks. And for those who weren't here last week, if you remember, we were talking somewhere in the neighborhood of about $36 million in available surplus funds from last fiscal year. So again, this is another area where you look at it and say, oh, how do you fit this round peg or this square peg in the round hole in terms of how much you have available to spend? And I think almost anytime, just speaking in generally, anytime you have a budget when you're having departments ask for things, oftentimes you have requests that are absolutely, you can see the need there. But the question is, how much do you have available and how do you prioritize what you're going to be funding? And obviously Parks has some very, it's very public needs. I mean, it's very visible to the public and used by the public. And so it's something that you would like to be able to address. But with that list, there's going to have to be some prioritization in how we go about things. And it may be part doing as what Rich said in terms of being innovative with the particular projects, or you just look at certain projects and you try to say, well, is this possible to phase something in or not? If it's one project where you have to get it all done and that's the total dollar amount, or if it's, for instance, like the park buildings where it's a amalgamation of particular maintenance needs across all sorts of buildings that you can do in some sort of here's what we can provide at a certain point in time and try to contribute over the years. And that's the kind of things that we face in making these kinds of decisions. But I think it's important just to get a feel for what's out there and get your input on what you think are priorities and what we should be focusing on. And hopefully that's been helpful with this evening. Are there any other questions for either Greg or Kim as we wrap up for the evening? Okay.
You have one more in the chat.
What's that?
There's one more in the chat.
One more in the chat. Okay. Did I miss it?
So I know Mr. Bogdanovic had a question for me about street paving. So when we're all done with parks, I'll be glad to answer that one.
Okay. I didn't see any other parks questions. So if I missed it, just let me know. But yeah, go ahead, Rich, and let's address that street question.
So the question was asking about, does the street department have the ability to hire a contractor to do paving? As you know, there was a question about the capacity of the street department to be able to handle all the paving projects coming forward. So just a little bit on that. So typically with any city forces, we always try to utilize the city forces first because we only have to purchase the materials as we own the equipment and the labor already works for us. So if we can use city forces in any department and just purchase the material to install it, well, then we can do twice the work. In the case of the paving, we do have a lot of paving coming forward. You're very right. And I know you're very up to speed on this because again, you're in this industry, in the transportation industry. So what we will do first is we'll work with streets. We'll see what we have capacity-wise, manpower and equipment both. And then we'll see how that's going to play into the paving of the major corridors that we're going to be doing in the Board Bill 184 that I was mentioning, Mr. Ironsell. And then what'll happen is if it looks like we're not going to be able to cover all that with street department crews, we will put out an RFP and we will pick up contractors to do that. We have done that multiple times over the year. years, on large paving projects, down on Manchester. We did it on Hampton Avenue. I could go through a list of about 10 of them that I recall. And, we do that because the street department doesn't have the capacity and we have a tight time frame to get it done. So yes, we do. Yes, we will if need be, but we prefer to use our own crews and, be able to get more streets paved, with the money we have.
Thanks, Rich. Do have another question on parks. Dennis asked, our parks are one of the best things about the city, but they're also a huge maintenance liability. Has there ever been a discussion about disinvestment from some that serve no real purpose, like Kaufman Park in downtown West, which could be an attractive space for development? I don't know, Greg, you want to take that?
Well, I'm sure Dennis knows about Prop P, about selling and leasing, and anything goes to a vote of the people. We have not had any internal discussions which would touch upon what he's broaching here. Kaufman, in the past, I will say that a few times years ago, once years ago, somebody brought up putting in a stage there to have a permanent stage for music festivals and such. I know they block off Chestnut there for some music festivals, but it would certainly involve Prop P if you'd served it for any other purpose than what it is now, a park. But it's an interesting point. But
Okay.
that's never really been discussed internally.
Right. Are there any historical or philanthropic grants available to assist with Soulard needs? Has that ever come up?
Not to my knowledge. The city had a grant writer years ago, as you know, and it was a funded position, our general revenue, which was great. That position went away years ago. I wish we had time to do grant writing and seeking grants. Not to my knowledge, but we do become aware of parks, as you know, of grants. As you know, we getting $8 million with the one Alan Jankowski's working on, the federal grant. But there years ago, as you know, we were also approached by a corporation about private dollars from the corporation to put towards Soulard, in the hope that other corporations in the city and the region would join that effort. And that did not go anywhere. It was pretty exciting at the time, 7-8 years ago. That would have been great to have an influx of private money, whether it was Soulard was managed out by a private entity, or whether we still manage it and just had some improvements. But not that I'm aware of. And Bob and I can certainly have that discussion.
Now, refresh my memory. We did get a grant recently for tree planting. Is that?
Yeah, that's what I'm referring to. That's what it's just, they pared it down. I forget the total. I don't recall the total figure that X number of cities received, but right now the figure is 8 million that we're talking about with Allen.
Okay. All right. Very good.
And that's years of work.
Over a period of years.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
But great
Okay,
point
well,
about grants. Grants are great if you can get them.
You get them, right. All right, well, we're coming up on the top of the hour. So I do want to thank Greg and Kim for presenting this evening and telling us of the needs out there regarding capital needs out there regarding parks. If you check your schedules and communications, our next meeting is going to be Thursday, February 22nd. And Rich, I believe we're going to be talking specifically about streets. Have I got that right?
I believe that's correct.
Yeah.
The street, I believe the traffic commissioner is gonna come to the meeting, and I will have staff to talk about the specific grants and so forth, that we have, applied for, are applying for, and will apply for.
Okay. So yeah, so a week from Thursday, same time at 5:30, we'll be talking about a lot of the street projects, to give you a little bit of color to some of the numbers we've already presented on that. So unless there's any other questions, I think we're done for the evening, and I hope to see you next week.
Are there any projects, Rich, Mr. Payne, that you all, that's been completed that you all can share with us so I can have a conversation with SLDC?
Rich?
I need to look at the list. Let me do that and I'll get with you, Paul, and then we can actually, get it over to you. And then you can specifically ask on those. And I think that's probably the right way to do it, actually.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, and we'll do that.
I'd like to thank everyone on this call. Really appreciate your time.
Great. All right. Well, thank you very much, and we'll see you next week.